Right, hi there everyone, welcome to the first of the disability webinars in 2012. Just to have a couple of moments of just talking you through the technology for those who haven't been on a webinar before, and also I think there's a couple more people that are due to log in as well, so we'll take a sort of calm and slow start and then we'll sort of get right into the content in a few minutes for those that maybe arrive a little bit late. So in terms of just sort of talking through the actual webinar experience, so looking down the attendee list, there's a couple of you I know attended the few I did last year, so this will be a bit old hat and more of a refresher, but for those that are new, really essentially you'll have already noticed that you can hear myself at the moment and the speakers that we have later on. You won't be able to see them live on a video stream, but you'll see their screens. So at the moment you're looking at my particular slideshow. There's going to be a couple of interactive polls to sort of get your input into the session and keep you awake if you're nodding off just sat there listening. And then at the end there's going to be a Q&A session. So you should notice on the right hand side on your kind of toolbar there's an area that you can write in the chat box. So if you want to maybe write where you're logging in from, for example, it gives you a chance to just type in the chat box and I can see what sort of worldwide spread we've got today. So maybe familiarise yourself with that chat box and start typing where in the world or where in the UK city-wise you're sort of logging in from. So while you do that and start familiarising yourself and the messages come in, I'm going to start to sort of just give a quick intro to disability webinars and a little very quick background to who I am. So I'm Martyn. I've been blogging for about 2.5 years on general sort of aspects of my life and having a disability, and it started very much as a hobby, and it just the fire in my belly was burning once I'd given a couple of talks to younger children with spinal muscular atrophy, which is the impairment that I have, and I could see the value in sharing the fact that individuals who have a disability are still able to live normal lives, and that when you're especially in maybe those teen years, it really sort of is quite an eye-opener to see older people that are really getting out there and living life and doing good things. So that's what spurred me in the beginning. And the blog's led on to some really interesting things. I've done various pieces of media work and consultancy and indeed, running the webinars. So the second point on the slides here was that last year I ran 15 webinar sessions. The topics mirrored a disabled person's sort of key life stages. And because it was very early days and I was getting used to the webinar kind of technology and setup, it was just myself talking on them about those personal experiences that I talk about in my blog. But as you'll see, I've moved it on a notch this year, and we've got some great guest speakers coming on later, and I'll get onto those very, very shortly. But in terms of the stuff that I covered last year, there's an ebook that sort of explains the life stages that I've referred to, and that's the book's called The Disability Diamond Theory, and that's available from my blog, which you can see the link there, and also the 5 sessions that will run the videos, and I'm recording the video now as well, so afterwards I'll be able to email you all the video and you can review it back or forward it on to friends that might have benefited that couldn't attend today. But the webinars from last year are on my blog /webinars, and right down the bottom you'll find them, so by all means go and check that out. So having a quick look now onto the questions here. I'll just open my little question box up. We've got Sarah in Canada, Richard's in Manchester, we've got Julie in Sydney, so as I said I thought there might be quite a worldwide spread. Caroline is in London, so welcome all of you to the first of the webinars this year. And as I say, this area is where you can ask me questions. I'll keep an eye on questions throughout if they're sort of relevant when we're mid-flow, but there'll be a good 15-20 minutes at the end where if there's anything that you haven't really sort of totally got straight, or you even want to add some more thoughts into the mix, then type it in here and I'll share it with the rest of the webinar attendees. So let's get on with today's session. Okay, so as you all know, we're looking at volunteering. These are the three sort of learning outcomes of the session. So it's to know the individual and social benefits of volunteering, to know how to find the right placement for you, and to use the experience as a platform onto employment. And I'm sure our speakers are going to go into a lot of helpful detail and also clarify that volunteering isn't always just a step onto employment, but it can be used in that sense. It's not the only reason to go into volunteering as well. So we're just going to run a quick poll now, sort of to get you guys in on it as well. And it's quite a simple question. Just going to launch it now. So it's basically, have you volunteered before? So if you click on yes or no, and then once I've noticed that everyone has clicked an answer, we'll see the general spread of the audience if you've already engaged in volunteering. It just gives us a bit of a leaning towards, you know, if you've all been involved or not before. We'll give it a couple more seconds for you all to vote. So you're literally just clicking on the yes or the no button as to whether you volunteered before. Okay, I think we're all done. I'm going to close the poll now. Okay, so I should be sharing it with you as well. So we can see that, yeah, a fair whack of you have actually volunteered before. So in a general sense, you know, you're starting on a front foot, but I still think that the speakers that we have lined up will be able to, you know, share some helpful knowledge. And like I said at the end, by all means, you can feed in with some of your thoughts as well for the rest of the audience to benefit from. So this is very much a platform for learning and sharing. Okay, so I have to remember to hide the poll. I made a mistake last year of leaving that on and continuing my slides without knowing that no one could actually see what I was doing. Okay, so we're back on track. So that's my little intro. First of all, I'm going to introduce Nic Clarke, who works in the volunteering department at Scope. So I knew Nic back briefly when I was working for Scope a while ago, but I think he kind of started just about the time I finished, but he's been really cool and helpful with a lot of the projects I've been doing online, and is happy to share some of his experience and knowledge for you. So I've just unmuted you, Nic. Can you just speak up and see if we can hear you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's perfect. Good stuff, Nic. All right, well, I'm going to make Nic the presenter, so I'm going to pass it over, and he's going to take you through about 10 minutes of his slides and then pass it back to me later on. So I'll pass it over to you now, okay, Nic?
Yeah, brilliant. Right, I just wanted to talk today a general introduction to volunteering, and then specifically looking around volunteering opportunities for disabled people, the progress and the challenges that still exist in accessible and inclusive volunteering. First of all, I wanted to thank Martyn for including an absolutely terrible photo of me at the start of the PowerPoint. That's much appreciated. To start with, what is volunteering? I think there are three key parts of volunteering. The first is that it's entered into unpaid. So you shouldn't be receiving any salary or wage for the volunteering you do. That doesn't mean you shouldn't get reimbursed your expenses, your travel costs, your lunch costs and so on, but you shouldn't be paid for it. The second is that it's freely entered into. It's your decision as an individual whether you volunteer and where you choose to volunteer. And thirdly, it should benefit someone other than the volunteer, such as the wider community. I think it's acknowledged that volunteering brings real benefits to the volunteer in terms of developing their confidence, skills, gaining new experiences, but through volunteering you should be benefiting the wider community around you. Now, there are many reasons why people would volunteer. Martyn said earlier it can be used as a route and a platform into employment. I would say it's also something that people do for a wide range of reasons. So I've highlighted some of them here. And through these, I would hope that everyone can see there's no such thing as a typical volunteer, and everyone has their own unique motivations and reasons for engaging in voluntary work. The first reason is to gain new skills and experiences, to do something different. So for example, if you want to gain experience in a new area of work, or you're looking at a career change, volunteering can be a good foot in the door in a supportive and welcoming environment. It can also be about learning something new and different. Maybe you've always had an interest in a certain area, and to volunteer in it, like I said, can be a great start. It might be a case of doing something different. A lot of people might be working or at college and they want to do something unique, so maybe something challenging with their free time. And volunteering is a great way to meet new people, often new like-minded people to yourself. A great way to meet new social groups, new networks, get involved in new things. And volunteering can be challenging. There's the idea that through volunteering you can develop yourself and challenge yourself. Volunteering is also about helping other people. Sometimes people will say it's about giving something back to society. That might be a group you're interested in, maybe around, for example, disability or homelessness or certain causes you're interested in. It might be that you've got certain skills and experiences, life experiences, that you can offer to other people to help them. I think a lot of people often volunteer because they've got free time, and it's the opportunity to do something productive and useful and different with that time. I think one thing that's always very important with volunteering is that people have fun, that they enjoy it, that they see it as an opportunity to do something different and, yeah, to make the most of it, really. Now, there are some barriers to volunteering. These affect a lot of vulnerable people, but particularly people with disabilities, disabled people. The first one is the attitudinal barriers. That may be people's attitude to volunteering, but also the attitude of the places where they're trying to volunteer. There could be fear and misunderstanding. That could be from the organisations who maybe don't have a great understanding of disabled people and their situations and needs, but it can also be from the volunteer themselves. They may not understand what volunteering is, and they may have a fear that when they go into a certain organisation or a group that their disability or maybe themselves will be misunderstood. It can be a lack of understanding about what people, or specifically what disabled people, can be capable of. It's also about accessible environments. Over the past few years, there's been a lot of progress in making volunteer environments accessible for people with mobility difficulties and challenges. However, there is still a long way to go to make sure that all suitable volunteering is accessible to everyone. I think there's also acknowledged that there are additional financial costs, sometimes through disabled people volunteering. It may be that they require additional travel expenses or reasonable adaptations in their volunteering environment in order to carry out the role. There's also communication barriers, making sure that every stage of the volunteer experience is accessible. That might be when people are looking around to find out more information about volunteering. It could be when they're applying, or at the interview stage, making sure that volunteering is accessible to everyone, whatever their impairment. That might be through accessible websites, accessible material, interpreters, support workers, and so on. Now, here are some statistics. 20% of the UK population define themselves as being disabled, and only 6% of disabled people regularly volunteer. Now, the non-disabled population, the number of people volunteering regularly is a lot higher, so this indicates to us that there are still a lot of barriers existing for disabled people to fully participate in society. There's also statistics that say that disabled people are more likely to volunteer in disability-related organisations. I think people volunteer for different reasons, and disabled people, as anyone, have a wide range of interests, so it's about making sure that every opportunity is accessible, not just those in the disability field. Some stats that came out last year say that 59% of the adult population volunteer at least once in the past year, and 39% of the adult population volunteer on a regular basis, meaning at least once a month. So the knowledge of volunteering and the number of people volunteering in the UK today is quite high. There are a lot of benefits to volunteering: increased employability, people gaining new skills, meeting new people, increased well-being, reduced social isolation, which can improve people's health and well-being, and the opportunity to contribute to others, offering their skills and contributing to their community. There's been a lot of progress made recently about making sure that volunteering is accessible to disabled people. A lot more staff and organisations are being trained in disability awareness, and this is leading to a greater understanding of disability issues. There's still a long way to go, but this is a positive step. The government also funded a fund that allowed organisations to increase the accessibility of their volunteer programs to disabled people, and this led to more people volunteering. There's also supported volunteer programs that have been set up to support people in accessing volunteering. That's open to disabled people, those people with additional support needs, and vulnerable groups. Job centres have become more aware of volunteering and its benefits, not just for gaining routes into employment, but improving people's well-being. So more people are being encouraged to volunteer whilst they're claiming ESA or job seekers allowance. There's more inclusive volunteering material available. Scope has produced some guides and programs, and there is lots of information on the internet about how accessible volunteer programs should be run. And there's also the idea of an Access to Volunteering Fund. This is something that Scope runs internally, but we're encouraging other organisations to do the same. And this is a fund that is set up to allow an organisation to make the reasonable adjustments to allow disabled people to participate in volunteering at the same level as non-disabled people. Other positive actions and progress, well, there's been many conferences. Last year was European Year of the Volunteer, and one of the focuses of this year was about increasing the awareness of volunteering amongst vulnerable groups, especially people with disabled people. And Scope has carried out research into the barriers to volunteering. We did something in 2006, and because we still believe there's evidence of barriers, we are starting a new research project this month. There's an increased range of volunteer opportunities, ones that may be more suitable for different groups. This might be e-volunteering, where people can volunteer at home from using their computer. An example would be participating or running webinars such as this and offering training. Then there's micro-volunteering, which is more small, bite-sized chunks of volunteering that might be open to people who may struggle to make a regular time commitment or to travel to different opportunities. It's also a good way of trying out something new. More material is becoming accessible to people with additional needs, and there's an increased visibility of disabled people in the voluntary sector, leaders, people who are working as consultants such as Martyn, people who are increasing the awareness of the issues facing disabled people and how to work with these groups. And there's increased networks in the voluntary sector on sharing information and good practice around volunteering and around how to manage volunteers. Within the voluntary sector, we share a lot of information about funding, about what is good practice, and about the changing environment. For more information, well, for Scope, we want to be a leading group in involving disabled people in all that we do, and that includes volunteering. So I'd encourage people to look at our website for more information. There's a national database of volunteering opportunities in the UK, and you can search for different opportunities in the areas that you're interested in through looking at this website. I'm well aware that not everyone is comfortable with technology, so if people are looking to volunteer, another good place to go is their local volunteer centre, where they can access further support and advice on what is volunteering and how to volunteer in their local environment. So I would say that's also a good place to go if you'd like to speak to someone face to face. I think that is everything.
That was fantastic, Nick. Thank you very much for that. That was full of a wealth of information.
Brilliant.
Are you cool to how to get it back over to me, yeah? So if you find my name on the right hand side and then right click on my name.
Done. Yep, there you go.
There we go, good stuff. Brilliant, so I think I'm now back on as the presenter. Thanks, Nick. What I'm going to do, Nick, I'm going to mute you again now, and then I'll enable you to come back on and speak when we do the Q&A, yeah?
Brilliant.
Cool, thanks a lot, Nick. Right then, so yeah, thank you very much for that, Nick. That was really, really helpful. I hope you all enjoyed that presentation. There's a lot of helpful background information and sorts of sources to use as well. So as I said, the video will come back out again afterwards. So if there's anything you missed, then it will be in the video, and I'll pop any helpful links in the email as well. So as I sort of said to you, essentially Sarah is someone I've met online, and she lives in Canada. So she was going to talk you through the reasons that she volunteered. So having had a stroke when she was in her early 20s, so before that she was actually non-disabled, and she was working and ticking along with sort of everyday life. From what I know of Sarah's story was that she ended up having a stroke, and this disabled her, and so not being able to go back to the job that she was in, being stuck indoors and really struggling to recover, the volunteering gave her an outlet to sort of get out and about and to keep from being bored. And also that it made her feel that she was making a contribution. She wasn't just sat at home doing nothing and relying on other people, but she was putting something back as well. It also gave her the ability to get out into the community and make new connections, and as I said early on, often this can assist in leading into employment. So for Sarah, whilst the early days were about recovery and rehabilitation, in the long run it ended up being that hopefully she can get back into employment. And I know now, while she's not in a job, she's very much more applying and on the lookout off the back of the volunteering. And therefore that last point she makes is it fills a gap in your resume or CV, so that the skills and expertise that you need for a job can be picked up from doing the volunteering. So there's an area that Sarah wanted to share about figuring out the support you need. So volunteering gives someone a low-pressured way to figure out the intensity, duration and frequency of support that they would need in a full day of work. So I know when I started my first day in the office, I was very unsure of if I would need equipment to help me or special software to help me do my job, or indeed have people come in to support with my physical needs, such as going to the toilet or getting drinks. And with the volunteering, it offers that sort of test cell, really, that you can work out how all of that is going to be needed, what your needs are going to be, and judge how much support you're going to need. And the example that Sarah's given here is that I need my nurse, which is the intensity, to come in and assist me for half hour, which is the duration, twice daily, which is the frequency. And again, I can draw on my personal experience that when I was working full-time in the office, I managed all morning and all afternoon at my computer, and colleagues would help make a drink. But during the lunch hour, my actual PA would come in to help me. So that kind of would fit within the intensity, duration and frequency element. And it shows people what you can do. So it is getting more and more difficult to not hire someone because they have a disability and need accommodating, but some employers unfortunately are still reluctant. So a volunteer can show the potential to employers that people with disabilities have marketable skills and are good, have good employability basically. So it's sort of a way of getting that experience and knowledge under your belt to show the world that you're more than able to do a job. So that brings us back to the employment step. So in terms of once you've realised that you would want to volunteer and there are lots of benefits from doing that, there are 3 questions which Sarah deems to be appropriate, which are: what are your interests? Where would you like to eventually work? What are your current limitations? Is it around transportation or having a tight service schedule, whatever it might be? And so once you've looked at your interests, and here Sarah's listed 4 areas down the left-hand side, which are working with kids or children, generally services, the theatre, or working with the elderly. And then you can work out the volunteer opportunities. So the school volunteer programs, libraries and daycares would all fit under working with children. And then obviously once you've shortlisted where potential opportunities are, I'd refer back to Nic's points earlier that you can go to other websites to then look up if any of those opportunities exist near you, or go to the local centres that Nic mentioned as well. Where do I want to work? So you think about what volunteer placement would help me develop forward to the experience that I need to work in that job. And if I need more education for that job, what volunteer placement would help me prepare for that education? So again, we've kind of touched base on this quite a lot before, but it's all around, whilst getting out and meeting people and having a purpose and all that world is very good for many volunteers, it also gives the experience, the knowledge and the skills and the education to be able to fill in any holes that you have on a CV to then be able to move into the job market. And at the bottom, Sarah said that this is about resume building. So then she looked at the limitation side. So, you have to be realistic with yourself and others about what you can handle. So, when I started my job, the big test was really if I could manage Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And whilst in the end it was broadly proved I could, I would argue in the longer run my going into self-employment was a consequence of sometimes, certainly in the middle of winter when I had chest infections, being an area that, I did actually struggle with that. But it doesn't always mean that you'd have to go into self-employment or not work. It means that you have to be very open and communicative with the people around you, like management and colleagues, about what you can do. And this exactly applies to the volunteering world as well. And she said that remember that you may not always be at the level of functioning that you are now. Things may improve. And I'd also add, conversely, some people may get worse as well. So again, it's not just being realistic about now, but it's being realistic about the future as well. And think of volunteering as a lab to experiment with what you can and can't handle, but don't put undue stress on yourself. So, and I know Rich's slides, I'll come on to them, and there's less slides because Rich is sort of better with speaking lots and having less of the actual slides to support him with his impairment. But I know that Rich was keen to sort of talk about that as well, that it's great as a lab and experiment to test what you can and can't do and use it as a method of going forward, but don't equally put too much undue pressure on yourself. And I think this is Sarah's final slide from memory, that she would just want to say that volunteering should be fun. And if it's not fun, then find something else to do. So very wise words, and I'm very sorry Sarah couldn't join us. Obviously I'll have a look into why the link up may have been a bit weaker and we couldn't link up with Sarah and Richard, and see if there's a way of resolving that for future webinars. But at least you're able to vaguely hear for a moment Sarah in Canada, and obviously I hope I delivered her slides as well as possibly I could. Okay, so the third and final speaker was going to be Richard. Now I would try again, but the connection did sound very weak and I don't want to lose any more time, so I'll quickly continue through, and then what I'll do, because Nic's connection was quite good, I'll bring Nic on and Nic and I will both share the questions that you may have. So in 5 minutes we'll be doing a Q&A, so start thinking up any of the questions or thoughts or comments that you have. So to get a little bit of, obviously we had Nic, who was from Scope and runs volunteering projects. And then we had Sarah, who volunteers in Canada after acquiring the disability later in life and has used that for the areas that she mentioned. Rich is actually a good friend of mine. I met him when I attended Coventry University, and we were sort of roommates and had 3 good years of hanging out and studying and having good times at uni. But since we've left university, Rich has had quite a journey with moving to Manchester and social care changeovers that went pretty wrong, and basically the story he was going to share. I think the slides here are just headings anyway, but if I can kind of recollect what we had talked through, I'll share as much as I can. So basically Rich graduated from Coventry University with a degree and a master's, and instead of going back home to Grimsby, he wanted to sort of stay in a larger city with more economic opportunity, and so he moved to Manchester. And in moving all of his social care over, there was a big hole in the support that he needed, and this basically meant that his ability to almost get out and about So Rich is just saying that the slides aren't showing. I don't know why that would be. Can the rest of you see the slides okay? If you just give me an indication on your chat box and let me know if you can see. Maybe Rich means the bullet points. So I think this is Rich, the version I've got isn't the version that you updated. Yeah, so basically you can only see the titles, and Rich has updated this for the presentation, but obviously we can't connect with him. So at least you're able to actually see what I'm talking through at the moment. So anyway, basically Richard moved to Manchester, the social care fell apart. This meant that to finish he started a second master was very, very difficult because of not being able to get out of bed or get a shower properly because of the social care problems. And this all snowballed into Rich getting quite bad depression and really on a downward spiral of not sort of, knowing how to get on with uni or how to get out into the job market when his base foundations were sort of so not there for him really. So essentially, once he fought and fought, a couple of years later, the social care situation improved and picked up slightly. It's still not perfect today, but it's a bit better, or Rich has learnt to cope with it. But it wasn't as simple as suddenly then feeling perfect and great to go into the job market. And part of when he was going through a lot of problems, he was at the Citizens Advice Bureau. And without sort of going into details that I don't want to fudge too much, Rich, you'd have been much more eloquent at this. But basically the opportunity to volunteer came up. So for Rich, it was less about sitting around and looking for a placement. It kind of landed in his lap. But equally, I think that just says if you are out and about and you know where you're trying to head towards and you know what your barriers are and you know where you want to go, then opportunities will also come your way and be ready to receive them and take them on. So basically Rich did some work, or some volunteering work, at the Citizens Advice Bureau. And a bit like Sarah, that gave him more fulfillment, the opportunity to get out and about, to meet people, to increase his confidence, to really sort of start progressing from the horrible kind of post-uni situation he found himself in. And then since then he's gone on to work on a project called The Right to Control. And basically this is a pilot around social care, and because Rich's background is very much around policy and sort of, having a lot of disability rights activism in his heart and his belly, it was a perfect thing to work on. So he's moved on from the Citizens Advice, I believe, now fully, and he's working a lot more with the sort of Manchester Council, in collaboration with Manchester Council, and for Breakthrough, who are a disability rights and disability training group. And yeah, basically Rich has been able to progress onwards and upwards to increase his confidence, gain new skills, and I know that he's really keen in the next couple of years to start to find paid work, and considering the horrible situation he went through originally. It's a testament to Rich that he stuck with it, and I know he would say that volunteering was a big vehicle that enabled him to do that. And I think with his conclusion, it was to sort of broaden it out to everybody else that, don't always feel that what the world of work is where you have to start, and also don't always think that volunteering has to be a step into work. It has its own benefits in its own right, but basically you should just know what you would want to do in life, understand the barriers in the way externally and also from your impairment, and then set about baby steps moving forward approach to get to where you want. And volunteering can offer that in a very, very good way. Okay, so technological glitches aside, again, massive apologies, and thank you for sticking with me. I was worried we might have lost some people when we had a bit of a glitch in the middle. So get the questions coming in. And I'm going to now bring Nic back in to support me on a little bit of this. Can you hear me now, Nic?
I can indeed. Well done, Martyn.
Oh, that was a bit of a nightmare for a few minutes. I think we got through. So yeah, I mean, if anyone has any questions, I've got the Q&A box open. So if you want to, make any thoughts on your own situation or ask Nic or I any questions about what has been discussed, then we've got about 10 minutes for a Q&A session. Is there any sort of thoughts you had, Nic, off the back of the content we've covered?
No, I thought it was really interesting because with Sarah's presentation, that I suppose it brings it home that impairments and disability, it can affect everyone. So it strikes me, is something everyone should be aware of.
Yeah.
And Richard's story, I think, was particularly great because it does show that, the power of volunteering, not just as a route into employment, but in terms of how it affected him, his opportunities, his confidence, and, where he's at now.
Absolutely, yeah. It was a good sort of breadth, I guess, of case studies in a way.
Yeah, I think it works well. I think I go back to what I said when I was talking. There's no such thing as a typical volunteer, and there's no such thing as a typical volunteer experience. But I think it's really good that people are willing to share their experiences, good and bad, really. Absolutely.
Well, it seems that everyone's been a bit shy, so I don't know if they're just totally stunned by this whole webinar world, or if we've delivered enough information that everyone's happy and content. I've got one more poll which I think I'll run, which I was keen to sort of gather everyone's thoughts on around the issue of barriers. I know you picked up on them, or you discussed the barrier stuff yourself, didn't you, Nic, about how there's some research coming from Scope, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. We're starting some research in the next month, and what we want to do is speak to disabled people who are volunteering about their experiences, good and bad, but also to disabled people who haven't volunteered, because it appears that the number of disabled people volunteering as a proportion of the whole hasn't increased significantly over the past 10 years, and we want to understand why that is and what organisations such as Scope can do to help improve that.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure we can share any of the updates and progress on that research later on in terms of emailing people. So I'm just going to launch this poll at the moment, and again, it's a matter of people clicking the answers that the answer they believe is the case. So the question is, what do you think the main barriers to volunteering for disabled people are? Now, it's not an exhaustive list, but I went for self-confidence, access, attitudes, and organisations' policies. So if everyone can click on the one they think will be the most relevant barrier, we can then have a look at what everyone said. Okay, they're coming in. There's a few more left to vote, so don't forget to click on the answer that you believe is the case. Give it a few more seconds. At least the polls are working today, Nick. Right, okay, cool. Thank you everyone for clicking on your answer. I'll close and then share that with you. So, that's interesting actually. There's 43% say self-confidence, 43% say attitudes, general attitudes. I meant that in terms of other people, so in terms of the people that I open up things for volunteering opportunities, but hopefully that was understood. And then 14% of organisations' policies. I mean, does that sound what you would have assumed, Nick?
Yeah, I mean it does. I think there's been so much work done around making buildings and premises accessible to disabled people recently that I think the issues are around two things: self-confidence of the individuals to actually think, I can do this, I want to do this, and I'm capable of doing it. And secondly, the attitudes of the organisation. It's not just about quick training, it's about making sure that people have the opportunity to ask the questions about disability so they feel comfortable with it.
Sure. Okay, cool. We've got a couple of little comments coming as well here, Nick, that I think you'll be able to pick up. Julie said, is the research conducted by Scope limited to the UK?
At the moment it is, yes, because it's following up on some research we did in 2006 in the UK, but I think we'd be really keen to hear about people's experiences elsewhere, so we can sort of share good practice.
So again, if I pop on the email that I send in the next couple of days, any sort of, and that actually follows on quite nicely because Sarah has just said on the chat box that if people want to talk to her, they can email her with, it's girlwiththe-cane, C-A-N-E, @gmail.com. But I'll pop that in to the email so people can have that. Sarah, a different Sarah here, Sarah Corker, said, research sounds interesting, would be interested in hearing more. So we'll definitely get some stuff out when you have news, Nick.
Brilliant.
And Caroline has said, hi, I helped with the research in 2006. Is there any way to help this time?
Certainly, certainly. I'm quite happy for people to share my contact details, for you to share my contact details, and we'll get in touch with people directly.
Brilliant. And Caroline says she's now a researcher and academic. And it is her, it's Caroline is on the front page of the research report.
That's excellent.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Caroline. I'll say I'll collate all of the general resources and information, sort of when we're done. Also, this is a really nice link. Kirsty Lydiard has said it's great that Scope involves people in their research. And I know that Kirsty's an academic herself, and she's just finished doing a PhD around disability and relationships. And Kirsty's going to be speaking at the webinar on the 22nd of February. So that enables me to lead into my plug for the next DWebinars. Cool. So I think we're probably done. Is there anything you wanted to finish on, Nick? Is any other sort of?
Well, I see there's one. I've got one question from Richard that he's written down, saying whether there should be an access to work type policy for volunteers. Do you want me to respond to that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that'd be great.
I mean, I know with access to work it can enable lots of people who are unemployed to get support financially and assistance to enable them to work. Unfortunately, there isn't a policy for all volunteering opportunities to provide the same. Scope thinks it's really important that there is something, and that's why we've got one in place. And we're trying to support and advocate for disabled people across the voluntary sector to make sure this happens. And in a perfect world it would. I think at the current economic climate with the cuts and so on, that's not going to be automatic, so it does require people to speak up and explain what their individual needs are.
Mm-hmm. So it's really a collaborative process, isn't it?
Yeah. I think we've got to work to work with different organisations and the government to make sure that changes happen, there's also a responsibility on organisations to change to meet the needs of disabled people, and for disabled people themselves to speak up and make people aware of what their needs and what their situations are and the costs associated with that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your input today, Nic. It's been really, really helpful and useful for me and for everybody else, I'm sure.
Brilliant. It's no problem. It's been really good fun. Thanks.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm gonna mute you now, Nic, and then I'm gonna wrap up. But thank you again, and I'll catch up with you soon. Okay. So yeah, that really does bring us to a close. The last slide we've got up here, obviously, just you can visit my blog or the magazine. The next webinar is Wednesday, the 22nd of February, and as I mentioned, that's on relationships and disability, which Kirsty, who made a point just a little while ago, is going to be sharing her findings, having interviewed lots of disabled people on the subject. So that's going to be a very, very interesting and useful session. And then I'm in the midst of finding another couple of speakers similar to Rich and Sarah's input on a sort of sharing personal experiences angle. And obviously I'll have a good look into connections and what went amiss today. But as I said, thank you for sticking with us. I think broadly everything went well. We just need to tighten that connection speed side up. Get in touch with my email address at the bottom. And as I said, I'll email everyone with the video to this questionnaire just to get a quick bit of feedback on what you liked, what could be better, that sort of stuff. And also all of the links and email addresses and other resources that we've collated and shared today. But thanks for your input. And hopefully I'll see you on the 22nd of February for Disability and Relationships. Many thanks. Bye-bye.